Good morning. It's 9:01 in Barbados and across the Eastern Caribbean. It's Wednesday, September the 4th, 2024. It's Let's Talk About It on Q100.7 FM. I'm your host, Rashid Best. Good morning to you. And I'm joined by my co-host, Joshua Hinkson. Good morning, Joshua.
Yes, good morning to you, Rashid. Good morning to our listeners, and good morning to our special guest this morning.
Yes, and as you mentioned, we have a special guest as our usual guest on Wednesdays. Senator the Reverend Charles Morris is fulfilling his senatorial duties at the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. So this morning we have a return of retired educator whose practice of education and teaching extends from Barbados to England and to the Bahamas. Former Independent Senator Alwin Adams. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Very well, thanks. Pleased to be here.
Our listening
And good morning to Barbados.
Yes, our listening audience requested you return to continue to educate us on matters of education. They found the last session quite fulfilling, and we at Q, we listen to our audience.
Sure.
So tell us, before I engage with you, I remind our listeners of the numbers to call, 434-1007 or 434-1070. You can also send us your WhatsApp contributions to 434-1007. Mr. Adams is here to discuss all matters of education this morning. So, Mr. Adams, where would you like to begin this morning in terms of your research? Where do you want to carry the discussion this morning?
Well, I would like to continue along the vein of making the case for the reform of education in Barbados, particularly because we have just gotten rid of one of the last vestiges of colonialism, and that is we've become a republic. And it is my certain view that the republic will not be able to make its way in the world if it is shackled to an education system that is colonial in origin and in outlook, and therefore the Prime Minister, I would say, must have recognized from feedback that she was getting from the education system that there will need to be a change in education, in fact a radical change, if the republic is to be able to compete in the modern world and indeed to pay its way in the world, and to therefore have an education system that will be able to prepare our young people to compete with the brightest and the best in the world. And I will go further and say, to be able to provide the manpower needs of the country to produce the goods and services that will not only satisfy the local needs, but also the export potential of the country. So essentially what I'm saying is what one of our bright sparks in the Caribbean, Canute Thompson from Jamaica, he is one of the foremost thinkers today, and he made the point that education, and indeed the reform of education, and economic development, sustainable economic development, are two sides of the same coin. And he also indicated that it is not so much the traditional education, which we'll still have, but it is the technical vocational side of education. In other words, that there should be at least parity of esteem, or a shift away from the traditional aspect of education, which is what we have, the one that we were handed down or imposed upon us by the British, and that we should move into the area of technical, vocational education so that our young people would be able to be out there competing with the best in the world. I also want to say that one of the reasons why Mr. Thompson mentioned that, and it's not exactly new, but he reiterated it, it is because the world is now a global village. And he was speaking of Jamaica, but in the case of Barbados, we have been led to believe that we have the best education system in the world, which is really a bit of indoctrination. But the fact of the matter is that what caused us to be somewhat smug in that area is because we have traditionally been able to outperform our Caribbean neighbors, for example, in CXC areas and so on, and some other things that we boast about. But in fact, our neighbors, our competitors, are no longer St. Vincent and St. Lucia and Dominica. It is the Asian tigers, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore. It is indeed the entire world, and therefore our education system must be reformed in order to gear our students to be able to operate in that basis.
Mr. Adams, before you continue, I want you to explain for us your view that technical and vocational education needs to be on par with the traditional subjects. How do you think we can achieve that goal?
Yes, we have made some baby steps in a way in that direction, which is good. But it is structural. Our system is really entrenched, and in order to explain it in a program like this, it would take up too much time. But to truncate it, you have to look at how the education system was set up, the history of the education system. And the history of the education system was deliberately set up to make Barbadian people, and by extension the Caribbean, dependent upon the metropolitan countries, the colonial masters. And in so doing, the research would show that there was a deliberate policy to confine education in the existing secondary schools to the academic areas, Latin and Greek and ancient history and things of that nature. But what is of particular interest is that they deliberately excluded technical and vocational education from the curriculum. And a very good example of that could be even my personal experience. I left school in 1961, and during that time, that was almost close to independence. There was not a single subject in the school curriculum that had any bearing at all on the economic development of Barbados. There was no industrial arts. There was no home economics. There was no principle of business. There was no accounts. In fact, the education system about which we boast so much of is more known for what it did not teach, actually, from what it actually taught. And to that extent, we have been indoctrinated and brainwashed into believing that almost everything that we wanted in terms of development, that we would have to bring people in to do that. A good example that I would give comes from the first principal of the community college. I think I mentioned this last week, but it needs to be mentioned. And he bemoaned the fact that even after independence, virtually, and someone had called in, kind of opposing what I said, but he made the point that all of the technical and middle technical jobs in Barbados were imported into the island. And that, notwithstanding the fact that we had an education system in Barbados that dated back to the 19th century. It was actually established in 1881. So that was an indictment of the education system, so that the educated class in Barbados boasted about this British type education, and therefore they were not at all inclined to shift the education planners were not inclined to shift the education system in Barbados from that classical academic sphere into the sphere of technical vocational. And that is in fact what the world needs. I just want to mention that the countries in the world, and this is incontrovertible, the countries in the world since the end of the Second World War moved away from the system that we presently have, which was imposed upon us by the British. And we remained with the British model. Countries like Hong Kong and Malaysia and so on, and Singapore, and not so much Hong Kong, but Singapore, Malaysia, and others, other Commonwealth countries too, but not in the Caribbean, they reformed their education. In many cases, they were at the same level. Some of them were even basket cases. Singapore, that we speak so much about, was a slum place, a place that nobody wanted to go. The streets were filled with almost rubbish and so on. But what they did, and people talk about the fact that there was a dictator and so on, I think that is the point. What they did is that they looked to see where they wanted to go economically, and then they geared their education system. In fact, they reformed their education system and integrated it into the economic goals of the country. And as a result, they catapulted over us. And we, up to this day, we have not properly reformed our system. And therefore we have fallen behind. And we are in danger of falling further behind. In fact, not in danger, it is inevitable that if we do not change our system, we will continue to fall further behind. And that is why I am saying that coming on the heels of the Republic, in the wake of it, or almost simultaneously with it, is the fact that the education system has to change. And it has to move towards TVEC in order to function.
Okay, Mr. Adams, that was quite a number of points you made. But before I engage with you some more, we remind our callers that our listeners rather, that they can call us at 434-1007 or 434-1070. But I do know that they are listening intently, and some of them are probably writing down notes, being more educated about our education system, becoming more educated rather. Mr. Adams, we hear the term fit for purpose. Do you believe that the education system over the years, the way it was designed and it was tweaked and altered, that the designers and the planners were trying to make it as fit for purpose for the time as possible?
No, fit for purpose is not just a cliche. But what fit for purpose means in terms of education is that the education system must be geared to the economic development of the country. And the reason why that has not been done are manifold, historical and otherwise. But in the UK, what one cabinet minister said when they were in the throes of reforming their system, in other words, getting rid of this 11 plus that they had imposed upon us, he said to, he was the Minister of Education, and he said to the person who was taken over from him, I think his name was Eccles, that he should not expect to get much support from cabinet ministers, because virtually every single cabinet minister at that time, that was around 1962, around there, 62, 63, were products of the grammar schools in Britain. And to be honest with you, that is virtually identical to what has happened in Barbados. The major players from both political parties, and I'm not into politics, but I'm into giving a perspective, were themselves products of the British education system, proud products of the system. And not only that, when the education system that we have now, the grammar schools and so on, when they were set up, the architect, an Anglican bishop by the name of Mitchinson, he was really a product. He was what you would call a creature of the colonial office. He was also coming into Barbados with a philosophy of education and life and ideas about black people, who's the majority of people in Barbados, that were akin to what we call social Darwinism. And that is the concept of the survival of the fittest and the laws of the jungle, whereby the persons that are perceived to be superior, they have a natural and God-given right to oppress, as the racists would say, downpress the mass population. And so the education system that he set up was designed not with the blacks, the masses in Barbados, in consideration at all. They were deemed to supply cheap labor, sometimes even surplus labor, for the plantation system, the plantation economy, whereby making the white plantocracy wealthy. And I think what Professor Beckford say, making sure that the blacks remain in persistent poverty. And that mindset pervaded the education system based on the structure that he set up. Because last time I spoke about the structure, he firstly he made sure that the elites that it was for the elites and to keep them in their power position. And he brought in all kinds of things, school fees and uniforms and the whole lot, and forms of entry that the black population could not actually meet. But he went further than that, and he brought in the head teachers, the principal, the head teachers of all of those schools from England, and in many of them, the teachers as well. So you had a kind of a double whammy there. And the record would show that those teachers, particularly from the elite schools, the sixth form schools and so on, were they were the advisors to the politicians of both political parties in Barbados. And therefore, their whole idea was to maintain their position, the dominant position of the elite schools, so that while the government over the years will tinker with education, the structure, the essential structure, would remain the same. And we can deal with the details of that a bit later, except to say that the foremost expert in organizations, a man called, I think, Peter Drucker, indicated that an organization that is improperly structured will suffer from a whole range of deficiencies, stress, talent that will not be able to be properly utilized, inefficiencies, the notion of maintaining the status quo, and so on. And he went on to say that unless that structure is changed. Whatever you do, you might change the CEO. You might do a whole range of other things that you say would help. But fundamentally, the system will remain the same unless the structure is changed. So all the inefficiencies that I just spoke about, the submerge of talent, the anxieties, the infighting, and all that sort of thing that you might find in education right now, that will not be removed unless the structure is changed. And essentially the structure of our education system is the grammar schools that I mentioned was not for our people at all. And then when that came under stress from the working class in Barbados, the principals of those secondary schools advised the Barbados government not to allow the masses to come en masse into the existing grammar schools, but to set up an inferior school. When these secondary schools were extended, a lot of people didn't recognize that. It was deliberately extended for access for the working class. And those schools, the regulations for those schools deliberately kept them as a kind of a chasm between those what we now call newer secondary schools. They're not really comprehensive schools, and the grammar schools, so that divisiveness and rancor, well, it's not rancor because some people like it, but the notion of a certain class of people should have a certain type of education and another class of people should have a superior type of education is exactly what Mitchinson did when he set up the schools in Barbados. In fact, Mitchinson came under some pressure from the elites in Barbados, the real planter class, who traditionally sent their students to England. But when Mitchinson is setting up his system, they pressured and made it very clear, and he didn't push back, that their children were not to sit next to the poor white children or the lower classes in Barbados. And that is why we have in Barbados, and the country should know this, we have what we call a first grade secondary school, which Mitchinson set up for the elites. And then you had the second grade secondary school, which he set up for the thing just below them. But the blacks were not really in the picture at all. The blacks only got into the picture because of the population. The population in Barbados, as you know, is overwhelmingly black. And obviously the schools over time could not exist at all without black people. And indeed what it did show, that the notion that they had of black people, that they didn't have the capacity to learn and to have education, is really a myth. And up to this present day, that myth still persists, because we have now organized our education system into what you might call, in football, you call it a league, and we have turned that into an art form. I might show later on how schools have students between 75 and 100 marks, nothing less than that. And it comes all the way down, where some schools only get students between 0 and 30 marks. And to believe that in a modern age, a population, a proud people like Barbados, the Republic of Barbados, would countenance an education like that. And as Knut Thompson said, he has something called TINA, and he said that they operate on the basis that TINA was anyway, it meant that things will always remain the same. I'll tell you what the TINA means, and which means that the present system is sacrosanct, and it will not change. Number one, they claim that if it changed, that the standards will drop, and number two, they believe that the world would come to an end. But the truth of the matter is that the notion that the standards will drop really comes from the persons whose privileges and whose interests and so on that they want to maintain. But there have been no evidence at all anywhere in the world, contrary to what certain people in Barbados are saying, that when you move from the present system that we have to a more democratic system, that the standards of education will change. I hope that when the callers call in, that I would be able to quote the figures to show that the standards, in fact, have risen almost exponentially when the change has been made.
Okay, we do have a few callers on the line, but we'll go to commercial break, and we thank our callers for holding since the beginning of the program. This is Let's Talk About It on Q100.7 FM. Stay with us. The program continues in just a moment.
That's the sound of your animals. Strong, healthy, and delivering yields you love. That didn't just happen. It began with you feeding them only the best. East Caribbean Feeds. Rest assured, we only produce your feeds with premium ingredients, no hormones, no animal byproducts, just everything your animal needs for maximum nutrition. Because your animals deserve only the best. East Caribbean Feeds from Maximum Nutrition.
ECGC Feeds are still here with better prices than before, with island-wide delivery available at Walk Springs Group Inc., St. Thomas, Bliss Variety Inc., Marchfield 6 Roads, St. Phillips, Feed Shed Constitution Van Stand. Telephone numbers 826-2168, 537-0089, and 851-1160.
Where are we off to today, everybody?
I want an easel, paintbrushes, canvas, and paint, of course.
Can I get a tie-dye kit, fabric paint, and some glitter glue, please?
Don't forget me. I need a sketch pad, crayons, and markers for school.
Sounds like we'll be on the road all day.
Not if we go to Lorry Dash. They've got everything we need. We'll be home in no time.
Make Lorry Dash the craft shop your #1 stop for all your artistic needs. From toddlers to professional artists, we've got you covered. Lorry Dash, the craft shop located at the Walk St. Thomas and in Bridgetown.
It's finally here, Q100.7 FM listeners. We are on Instagram. Give us a follow on our new Instagram page at Q100.7 FM for more of your favorite radio station. Q100.7 FM, the heart of the community. Follow us. Q fans, the time is getting closer. Q in the Community returns to London September 21st at Oakington Manor, Wembley, starting at 2 p.m. Get ready for all the magic of Q in true London Bajan style. And of course, great Q music for dancing.
I'll give you the best I can give.
DJs from Barbados, King Scorpion and Dr. Scotty, along with local DJs. And for the live radio broadcast, I'll be there, Kimberly Skeet. Make sure that you follow us to Q in the Community. Buy your tickets now for just £20 for adults, £5 for children at london24.eventbrite.co.uk and go to info@bajanhubuk.com for more information. Q London is here again. Don't you miss it.
I've got my swim cap and comb and my paperback book that I'm almost through.
9:31 in Barbados and across the Eastern Caribbean. We go to the phone lines. We have retired educator Alwin Adams here with us to discuss all matters education. Good morning. It's Let's Talk About It.
A very good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, sir.
Okay, Your Honorable, quick point. So we're at house, so any disruption, please bear with me. I'm going to speak tall. You said that Dr. Leonard Shorey in 1973 was making a proposal to change the system from 1983 to 2024. We had successive governments, and they were not able to change it. And as I speak now, I'm saying the ministry doesn't have a definitive as to what they're going to do. There's all this dipsy-doodling, and they can't come to any official. You yourself probably can't come to any official definitive as to what will happen going forward. And another thing, if in the days that discrimination in class and whatever, ding send down the road going to Harrison College, Queens College, Lord, you name it. And your argument is so much on song, no disrespect, but it's on song. I hope you evaluate.
Sir.
People from all and sundry is going to go to all the different schools. Where the ministry from 1973 to today, as the recommendation by Dr. Lanshuri, hasn't changed the 11 plus. Tells you something is wrong.
It tells you that you are wrong.
I know.
That is what it tells you.
I regard you perfectly.
Yes, well, let me deal. Let me
I want those workmen to come back in with that.
Let me deal with a number of things before I might not be able to get into the situation. The idea that if you change the 11 plus, standards will drop does not have any basis in fact whatsoever. And I have in front of me the statistics from the United Kingdom, which was one of the last of the industrial countries to move away. They actually changed in 1969. I was living there when it happened. That is why I'm so knowledgeable about it. And in the statistics that I have, which is saying that the overwhelming majority of students in Britain, which is really different from here in Barbados, the overwhelming majority of students in Barbados do not write the CXC. A minority of students write the CXC. And we would need, you can ask the authorities for the figures, but in the United Kingdom, by 1954, there was only 10% of students getting what we call 5 equivalent of the CXCs, GCEs. Now, all over the years, I will save some time because it just shows progression and improvements, significantly so. So that I have figures even later than this, but the last figure I have in front of me from a document from the examination results in England and Wales. In 2011 and 2012, 81.1% of the students in Britain have the equivalent of 5 or more O levels, and close going into 50% of them go on to get 2 A levels, which is saying to you that the change from the iniquitous 11 plus yes.
You're an expert teacher.
Of course I am. Yes. It's really what I would say, together with the keeping of the grammar schools, that when you conjunct the two of them, that they bestride, to quote Shakespeare, they bestride the educational landscape in Barbados like a colossus, a malignant colossus. So in fact, they need to be taken off our backs. Secondly, the reason why, as early as 1973, the reason why the Shore report was commissioned was because it was noticed that after the 11 plus, the results, the performance of students in Barbados, far from improving, it was declining for the majority of students in a significant.
And when nothing was done.
Listen to me. Listen very carefully. In a significant way, Dr. Shorey gave his report and recommended the abolition of the 11 plus.
Gotcha.
And he called for random selection. Of course, the government did not do that. And the reason you are saying that the government is omnipotent and that they have the wisdom, and therefore, since they did not change it, it is good. Well, the main reason why they did not change.
I didn't necessarily say that, but.
Well, I'm implying that. But the reason why they did not change that is because they were being advised heavily by the directors of education, Hayden and company, who came from Britain, and the headmasters
They kept the status quo.
yes, and the headmasters of those schools
You were really good.
yes, and the headmasters of those schools who were their advisors,
Yeah.
and they themselves, whichever prime minister or major ministers you speak about, you will find that they were products of the, and not only that products, but proud products of the grammar schools. And so, I remember, well, I can call the name Tom Adams speaking at the Cave Hill, I think it was Cave Hill campus graduation.
Yeah.
He said that the system in Barbados is an elite. Don't forget that he had lived in England for a considerable time. And I would say he wanted some change. He can get it done. But he said the reason why the system remains so is because the Barbadians working middle classes want it to remain.
But you know, a good set of people that as we're talking about the condemnation, you know how many people benefited from this same 11 plus? A whole cadre of persons in this country, you know?
Yeah, but that is, I tell
Probably you did.
I would tell you, not me. I can tell you that it was a really a death knell for the majority of students in the country up to this present day. And what Tom Adams did was, in fact, in his effort to change, he raised, I think it was Louis Tell, raised the school leaving age.
Right.
Because the secondary schools that we extended to, which was the St. Leonard's and Princess Margaret, and so their school leaving age was 14 years old.
It was 14.
All up, I believe, in your day. And the reason why it was that, because those children were not expected, they were not deemed to have the intellectual capacity to write the exams that the children in the older secondary schools were writing, and so they had to leave school at 14 years old.
That was in the 60s and prior.
Before that,
before, I remember that 14 thing, but then it extended up to 16, I think it is.
But let the Barbadian public get to know what was happening. Obviously, there was a wastage of talent going into those schools that were being submerged. And that is happening up to today. And what
submerged, we got people of all capacity
let me
coming
speak.
out with high
let me speak, sir.
Just a
minute, let me speak. The statistics do not support you. If you look at the 11 plus results up to this year, and every single year, if you look at the CXC results up to this single year, and I already told you, I'll mention that only a minority of students actually write the exam. And every single year it is like a recurring decimal. What happened is that the propaganda machine goes to work and gives the people the impression that because 10 students got top marks and so on, that and all the kudos that is given to them, and rightly so in a way, that is the real purpose of education in Barbados. But that is only the purpose for education in Barbados for a minority of persons. And the idea that you are speaking, that you are saying that these majority of students are benefiting, the figures, you have to look at the evidence. The evidence is showing that year after year, and that is why different governments try to change the system, that the majority of students in the country are not benefiting in the same way as others are benefiting. And that when we had an agricultural economy, when 60, 70, 80% of our students would be working in some aspect, some spin-off of the sugar industry, the world has changed, and that is not the case now. And while you were able to contain a social containment of persons who were coming out of school, let me tell you what the figures say. The figures say, coming from the Ministry of Education, that 70. This is from Richard Carter. This is the statistician there. Right. That over 70% of all of the island students leave school, is close to 80%, without qualifications, and even worse than that, without any requisite skills to meaningfully participate in the Barbadian economy. The outcome of that, but these are the facts. The outcome of that, as Professor Lois from the Nobel Prize winner and Drucker and others would say, the outcome of that is that you are in the modern day, more so than in the agricultural days, you are going to get social dislocation. The social dislocation that is happening now, where you cannot go out of your house without making sure that you're looking left, right, and center.
I got you.
And indeed, the type of anemic economic growth that we have been having in Barbados is directly, not tangentially, directly related to the fact that we have these students coming out of schools that I just mentioned. This is from the Ministry of Education. I'm not making them up.
Oh, okay.
And it is saying that unless you radically change that structure, this is not just about people are saying, oh, do something in the primary school. Things are being done in the primary school all the time. But the fact that the structure remains, the structure is a 19th century colonial structure.
So emphasis has been placed now on from the time you're in kindergarten, 2-3 years up, and the evaluation process now that was sort of lingering is now at the forefront of having children looked at for sight, hearing, and all that goes with it to improve. I could go with you with that, but I can't go unilaterally with you with about this discrimination and what you're implying. I beg to differ strongly, because I am satisfied that all and sundry in Barbados from all classes going to schools up and down, and that's a fact. You can't disprove that.
I have just disproved it, but you can believe what you want to believe. I have disproved it because the statistics are there, and let me tell you something. The government has not make the move. I'm going to let other people come in. To
you know who would be good to not cross you badly. You know who would be good for you to dialogue with Mr. That gentleman. He was at Harrison College. Help me the name.
German. He should really call in.
He's a gentleman that would stand toe to toe with you, like myself, and bring it to a good consensus.
I would be happy about that. But
I can try and see if we can get that.
But let me tell you what's been driving, in my opinion, what has been driving the Prime Minister and the Ministry and so on. That 2 commissions conducted in Barbados fairly recently concluded that the failure in the education that the education system that we have, the result of the problems that I just explained to you. And when the Prime Minister will be confronted with those statistics, perhaps, maybe in a way too hurriedly, she immediately said that this system has to change. But of course the system is entrenched and cannot easily be changed.
In the colonial situation.
Yeah, it cannot easily be changed. And even though people might ask me later on what I'm going to do about it.
I've asked you that already.
Yes, but let me tell you what happened. What is the answer to that? It would be presumptuous of me to come and say that I am a soothsayer and I have all the issues. But what I can say is, though, that it requires an input from the key sectors of the Barbadian society to be able to come together. It would be a disaster if in this country, with all the types of people that we have, we could not put together a team, a good package of persons to come up with a plan. And I would like to discuss that further, because because it was I think it was the United States President John F. Kennedy who in 1963, these are the years after the Sputnik, the Russians had sent the Sputnik up and so on, and everybody was panicking in the States. And he was basically saying that it was the failure in the education system in the United States that had been causing them to fall back in the area of science and technology and so on. And he went further and say that failure of the education system, which I was just trying to point out, is also breeding failure in the economic and social system. That is Kennedy. And what he called for a national commission, a national mission, really. And if you said you're a researcher, look at the Apollo mission. The Apollo mission was to put a man on the moon by 1970. But it called for a national input. Every person in the nation coming together to bring forward the ideas. I would have some good ideas. You yourself may have some. You might get a Damascus period and get a change of mind and realize that we must change, and that is how we will get the change. So the reason why we have not gotten the change is because we have not had that level of consultation. But it doesn't mean that we are going to fail, simply because over the years from 73 right down to 2024, successive governments have tried and failed. It's no reason at all why we should decide that the status quo must remain. What we must say is that the baton is now passed on to a new generation of persons in Barbados, a new generations of young people who are not prepared to go to school for 15 years and so on and come out without qualifications or without skills. And that they are the ones, as the commissions were saying that the Prime Minister would have in her hand, they're telling the Barbadian, the commission is interviewing the young people, and the young people are saying that it is the present system of education that is the cause of their problems, not only their parents, because the role of the education is to compensate for the shortcomings of the parents, not the school by itself, but the major role of the school is to compensate for the shortcomings of the parents. But the school must have help to do that. So I hope I have answered your questions. And if you still want to hold on to your views, that's your opinion.
We thank Raul for calling in. He's an avid listener to the program. It's 11 minutes to 10. We go to our next call. Good morning. Let's talk about it.
Good morning, Mr. Adams.
Good morning.
And to CVC staff and CVC listeners.
Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Mr. Adams, I am on vacation.
Yes, sir.
But I have been hearing your voice dealing with this, especially the 11 plus.
I hope I'm helpful to you. Go ahead.
I have been listening to you over a period of time.
Yes, sir.
You and Mr. Wickham.
Yes, sir.
Now, at my age, approaching 80.
Yes.
I teach construction.
Yes.
Through the training board and the polytechnic, sending young people through that areas. And I hear you just now say to Wall, which I disagree with, how did you get to link the 11 plus with children living at 14? You get me?
But if you were listening,
well, caller,
I listen. So
caller,
yes,
he didn't link the 11 plus to the students living at 14. He was making the argument that the raising of the school leavers age was an action taken to ensure that students have a better
a longer period in school.
Yes, so there was no link established.
But let me try to answer. Let me answer your questions. The reason is that when the St. Leonard School was set up, and I taught there in 1961. I taught people when I was there. I think Gabby and Richard Stout and so on were there before I went abroad. Those schools were set up, and when they were set up, the age limit at those schools was 14 years old. In other words, the age of leaving those schools were virtually the same as leaving a primary school. They were also not allowed to do overseas exams. They were not given textbooks and things of that nature. In fact, they were designed to offer a sop to the working class population, because it was the working class population that had pressured the first black government in Barbados to get their children into the schools, the secondary schools in Barbados. And caller, those secondary schools were really, I think, 10 older secondary schools that had been kept deliberately small to ensure that your grandparents and parents' children and so on could not get into the schools. Also, the fees were so high that they could not get into the schools. During my time, the fees at Harrison College, I think, was something like $24, $26. And my mother was a maid, and she was working for 5 shillings and so on a week. So the point is that there is a link between the 11 plus and that, because when the 11 plus came in 1958-59, it also came in because there was further pressure on the government of the day.
Okay.
Let me finish. Owing to the fact that what the black Barbadians were recognizing is that the same type of students, even after the newer secondary schools were built, the same type of students were still going into the older secondary schools, and they were making noises. And what the advisors to the government, I'm saying this because I think it must be said, it was not really the politicians that were really making the decisions. The politicians were being advised by persons who had a vested interest in the colonial system. Look and see who were the directors of education and so on, and the chief education officers. And they said to the government, bring in the 11 plus, because this is the exam. It's not an exam that came out of Barbados. This is the exam that is used in Britain to keep the working class British people out of the British grammar schools. And that is how the 11 plus got here. The 11 plus is a colonial implant that has nothing at all to do with the Barbadian genius. In fact, let me tell you this that you may not know. It was not even set in Barbados. It was set in a place in England called Murray House. And the Scottish people did not care anything about 11-year Barbadian children. They didn't know them, and they cared less about them. But they, as our colonial overlords, were setting the exam for our 11-year-olds. And the kind of power that they had, the Ministry of Education could not open those papers. They didn't know what was in the papers. Up to 1989, when I became headmaster of St. Leonard's School, the papers were still coming from Scotland, and sometimes they came down with mistakes in them. And I remember Gladstone Holder, pontificating about this stupidity. And the ministry said that they had instructions. The reason why they couldn't pick up the mistakes is because they could not open the papers. Could you imagine anybody in Barbados setting an exam for anybody in Scotland, and the Scottish people can open them?
Oh, don't let's go all down that historic.
But the history. Hold on a minute. The history is very important, because let me finish here now, because Val McCommie, who was one of our outstanding diplomats and so on, he said in 1992 to the education authorities in Barbados, when they were thinking about reforms, he said that it was very important to know the development, the social and economic development of Barbados, and the place that education played in that development. Because if a reformer is trying to reform the education in Barbados, and that person or persons are ignorant of the development of education in Barbados and the role it played, because it directed our development, and the role that it played, they are likely to be to fail. They will be just flailing in the water like driftwood, Because if you do not know what I just mentioned, you will not recognize that the structure of the education system and the purpose of it was not for the development of Barbados. The purpose of it was to downpress the Barbadian population. So go ahead, sir.
Let me get and the producer. I would like to say to the producer, I don't call you with a station to be on 20 minutes and 30 minutes. I don't believe the time is expensive. And what Mr. Adam just said, I have heard from him already.
Alvin,
just a minute.
No, you just a minute. Hold on.
But you're trying to attack me, or you're trying to give a contribution?
Hold on a minute. You mentioned you don't call to be on for 20 minutes. That's fine. You've heard this before. That's fine. There are individuals who are now hearing Mr. Adams for the first time. So although you claim, although caller, before we go to commercial break, although you have heard it before, there are those who are being informed now. As we have seen from the last time Mr. Adams was on, the WhatsApp messages indicated as such. So we don't need to hear that you heard it before, or that you don't wish to be on for 20 minutes. Okay?
But caller, just before you go, one of the greatest things about education is repetition. And indeed, if you believe that repetition is bad, what it does is reinforce the significant points. The point, I am not speaking off the top of my head. There's nothing that I say here that is not supported by facts and statistics. The Ministry of Education, speaking about the transfer of pupils from primary to secondary schools, said that the current system of transfer has evoked serious concern from many educators. And it went on to speak about the inequitable, I'm quoting, the inequitable distribution of the most academically inclined students to certain secondary schools and the lower orders to the other schools. Secondly, the difficulties inherent in the allocation of students to schools which are relatively far from their homes, very far from their homes. That is the Ministry of Education 1992 NACE paper. 3, that the image of the schools, which we now referring to as neuro-secondary schools, some people wrongly call them comprehensive, they are far from. That the teacher morale is low. The self-esteem of the teachers and the students are low. That those schools to which many of the low achievers are assigned are deemed to be inferior schools, not only by the students, by the teachers, and by the general Barbados population. This is what the Ministry of Education document that I'm quoting from actually said. And it talked about the low student performance of the students in the common entrance. Every single year, you cannot point to a single year since the common entrance was existence in Barbados that it actually did what it was supposed to do, and that is to raise the standard of education for the working class in this country.
Okay, Mr. Adams, it is 10 o'clock. We're going to take a quick commercial break. If the caller wishes to stay on the line, he may do so, so he can make his contribution to the program in a respectful manner. If not, we'll go to another caller. This is Let's Talk About It. Stay with us.
At Koyman, we know every project starts with a vision, a spark of inspiration to build, beautify, construct, and create. And whether you're a construction pro, a home improver, or a decorative DIYer, Koyman has the products, inspiration, and advice to complete your vision to perfection. Everything you need to succeed with every job, every project, every time. Visit us in store or online today at koyman.bb. Koyman, everything you need to succeed.
Some stories made us shake our heads. Others left us shocked.
The entire block bordered by a section of St. Michael's Row and Bridge Street was completely burnt out, taking along with it 7 businesses.
Some made us hold our breaths, think about who we are, or rethink how we live.
The advent of television, video, and other electronic entertainment and information devices has been accompanied by a loss in the reading and writing skills of many Barbadians.
But they all made us stop and listen, and want to get to the bottom bottom of the issue.
The Problem Play Complex was originally scheduled to be opened in October last year, but that plan was frustrated by serious technical problems.
All these stories and more from the archives. Listen on Q100.7 FM Mondays and Fridays at 4:15 p.m.
The Q train is making its next stop at Grisette's Playing Field, Grisette St. Michael, on Thursday, September 5th. Join us from 11 a.m. for another exciting Q day filled with your favorite Q tunes that will keep you on the dance floor all day long. And we can't forget the food, the drinks, and the karaoke. See you at Grisette's Playing Field, Grisette St. Michael, on Thursday, September 5th, because Q is good for you.
Lying here beside you.
Don't miss some of the biggest stories of your day every day at 1 p.m. in the CBC News World at 1. That's when CBC News highlights what happened and what you need to know. Listen in every day thanks to our partners, the National Insurance and Social Security Services, Nichols Bacon Company, Laurie Dash Craft Shop, and Great Healthworks. The CBC News World at 1, credible and relevant across the stations of the CBC.
That's the sound of your animals. Strong, healthy, and delivering yields you love. That didn't just happen. It began with you feeding them only the best. East Caribbean Feeds. Rest assured, we only produce your feeds with premium ingredients, no hormones, no animal byproducts, just everything your animal needs for maximum nutrition. Because your animals deserve only the best. East Caribbean Feeds from Maximum Nutrition.
ECGC Feeds are still here with better prices than before, with island-wide delivery available at Walk Springs Group Inc., St. Thomas, Oblis Variety Inc., Marchfield 6 Roads, St. Phillips, Feed Shed Constitution Van Stand. Telephone numbers 826-2168, 537-0089, and 851-1160.
It's Let's Talk About It on Q100.7 FM. We're joined by Mr. Alwin Adams, who is a retired educator. Well, we say retired, but he's still educating us on this program. And of course, he wants to discuss all matters relating to education. And we will engage with some of our callers who were holding on the line, 434-1007 or 434-1070. We return to the phone lines. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Go right ahead.
Good morning. I would like to say good morning to Mr. Adams and the moderator and the Barbados.
Oh, thank you very much. I think I know this voice, actually. I think so.
Probably not. Yeah. But I'm really appreciative of what you're doing, because we are in a state of, I really don't know what to call it, but because majority of consumers of education does not know the history of education, they do not place the appropriate value on it. I'm saying that because in the earlier days, when there were school fees, and even before that, to block the average black person in this country, in some areas, I'm speaking about St. Andrew at this point, to go to a secondary school, the priest mandated that your parents had to have land. I don't know if you know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had to have land. And then in some of the primary schools where there were black teachers, they discriminated against their own black children. If you didn't have a godfather or your parents weren't in some kind of respected position within the community, you were basically given up as a non-entity, no matter what your ability was. And as you were saying, the system was designed mainly to educate the planting class children. It wasn't designed for us black people. Because if you look at all the older secondary schools, especially in the country areas, it was mainly for the plantations children. And they had the means of getting their children to school. And it was very late in, I guess, 1912, 1913, and beyond that you found blacks in those grammar schools.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to really look and remember then in the late 50s, early 60s, then one had to pay school fees. I know of a person, he passed to go to Combermere. His father was a seaman, and the whole community was very proud that he had that opportunity. The dad went out on a trip trying to make the money to pay for the school fees and clothing and books. Unfortunately, a month into his voyage, he took sick and died. And that was the end of that person's opportunity to go to Combermere. And there are many stories like that.
Yes. I am very glad to see that you brought the history side of the equation into play, because as I mentioned before, Val McCormick had indicated to the educators in 1992 that if they did not get to come to grips with the history of the education in the country, that their attempts to reform it would falter. And indeed, that is exactly what happened in the situation with partial zoning. And it is likely to happen now, to some extent, if the present persons involved do not sufficiently take into consideration the notion of how to be able to deal with such a structure that was entrenched for so many years. So that, for example, by trying to maintain the system, we find, I spoke about the way how the scores for schools were organized in the modern times. You get a situation, and this is coming from Dr. Shorey, who used what the Ministry of Education, the categories that they had: 71 to 100 students at marks, 51 to 70, 31 to 50, and 0 to 30. And this is in the present day now, which in a way is really glorifying the past. It is making sure that the same type of students that got into the older secondary schools remain there. In other words, the United Kingdom researchers made the point that it is not really the parents or the students that choose the school.
It is the system.
It is the school that chose the parents, that chose the students. And a lot of people don't really understand that.
And this year's result is a typical example. Who was the top student this year? Where did that person go to school?
Right.
How many people would have the ability to go to that school that top student went to? And the upper class, they make sure, because they have the ability to pay, that the quality of education is at a certain standard. So the masses are just thrown to the wolves, and those same people in political power, they really don't give a toss, because my child is doing well.
Well, Mom, I don't believe that's a fair statement. Those politicians are actively seeking to reform the education system now.
Yes. Okay. Let me indicate a few things here for the public. Dan Carter, writing in the BUT magazine, using the Ministry of Education statistics, indicated that during the 1980s, significant numbers of students, the whole decade of the 80s, he used from 1980 to 1989, significant numbers of students were actually receiving marks between 0 and 30. The major year that he highlighted, and some people might say that this is dated, but this was in 1984, where 20% of the students sitting the exam got the marks between 0 and 30.
Wow.
Now, whether or not those students had placed the top school at the top of their list, those students, those 20% of students who would mainly be boys, would be allocated to a newer secondary school, so that you will not find a single student with a low mark in elite secondary school.
And for a teacher to contend with
that is
20
that is very significant. Now,
students with those abilities.
The point that
that's very difficult.
Yes, the point that I was trying to make to the previous callers, in fact, is that kind of recurring decimal has happened virtually every single year, coming right down to 1924, and it is saying that we are glorifying an education system that is manifestly failing the majority of our students, and these are working class students. In fact, I would be amazed if there is a political party in Barbados that would put their head on the block to maintain this system, because this system is really untenable in relation to trying to uplift the masses, because you cannot any longer say to the masses that because they sit the 11 plus, that by itself is allowing them to have upward social mobility. It is true that some of them will do so, but every single year the statistics show that they are in fact failing. So I think that your idea is a very good one, and what the gentleman from Grenada said about the education system, and this was when he was working in the UK, he said that when society fails one generation of students, it lays the foundation. When the school system fails one generation of children, it lays the foundation for similar or even worse failure in the generations to follow. Now, what we are reaping now in terms of social dislocation, what we are reaping now in terms of reports that I had when I was in the Senate of persons in the prison, happen to be the students that are coming from our schools. That when I was in the Senate, 950 students, young people, were in Glenderry prison, and they came from 7 neuro-secondary schools, almost all of them, and for almost 95% of them had difficulty in reading and writing. So that even when they come out, you will have recidivism. They are likely to return to prison
because they feel useless.
Not only that, they feel useless, and in some ways they are, because of the system.
Whatever happened?
And I just want to make the point, because we were on for a long time. I just want to make the point that it is a disgrace that we will have so many of our young people in prison and paying. I think when I went to the Senate, I think they said it was $35,000 to keep them there for a year. And that money, if we had used that, change our education system, and allow those students to get the quality education that we should be giving them, we would be keeping them out of prison, and they would be productive citizens. So by reforming the education system, and it is only really in a way by reforming the education system that we will get to the real crux of the matter in relation to our criminal justice system.
So what happened to the technical school? The technical schools, can't they get into IT and technical, because it was technical and commercial years and years ago? Now we're more into the IT, but we still need the technical skills. So why aren't we thinking of technical and IT schools in the secondary and even starting in the primary schools? Why aren't we doing that?
Very, very briefly, I'm not saying that we are not doing that. What has happened is that we have built into our structure a situation that is sending out students from the primary school into the secondary school who are not able, based on their level of performance, they are not able to benefit from the technical education, because it is a myth that the technical education is only for persons who have no brain. That is not so at all. So where the problem is the reforming of the system, so that we will change that perspective that only certain students have the ability to reach a certain intellectual level, and that other students, because they're poor, have a ceiling on their performance. We are saying that the 11 plus should not be allowed to maintain that view about our children in Barbados.
Okay, we thank that caller for her contribution. It's 18 minutes past 10. We go to our next caller. Good morning. It's Let's Talk About It.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm saying good morning to Mr. Adams and the rest of the panel.
Yes, thank you very much, sir.
Good morning.
Now, I'm looking at the system that we presently have, and from what has been said, and I can agree with most of all the things that Mr. Adams has said, is that there is a problem in the system, and the problem right now is an antiquated system we inherited years ago, which we are keeping, and it benefits some people, but it does not benefit the majority of people. If it was in my power, there were two things I would do to reform the system. One, abolish the BSSSEE, the combinations exam.
Yes,
One.
sir.
There's the first thing, we will abolish that. The second thing, all secondary schools be equal, take off all the sixth forms from all the schools.
Yes.
And if you want to go beyond that, you go to the community college.
Yes.
That, in my opinion, helps to level the playing field. And if you can get that playing field level, then children would be taught. You wouldn't be taught English and math because you have to get to Harrison College. You'd be taught all these subjects in the school, and you will go into secondary school with a good foundation, hopefully in math and English. What you should also do in the secondary school is to expand the curriculum to involve technical vocational education, because right now we are saying we are working towards academia, and all children are not academic. There are lots of children who are interested in using their hands. They become plumbers, they become electricians, and various jobs. And these are the jobs that we need in society. If we reform the system in that way, I believe we have a better chance of improving production in Barbados. But when you take children and give them exam, and as was said earlier, the 11 plus was just to placate a few people. When you do that, and then you find that children come through school at 16 years old, you put them out, and they have nothing. They don't even have a skill. They can't even cut a piece of wood. And they go sit on the block. That's the only thing they can do. And as a result of these things, this is why we have the kind of society we have today. Because everybody wants something, and most people don't intend to work for it, so they get it however they can. So what we have to do is reform the education system, get rid of the combinations. There is also a disconnect, in my opinion, between the primary school and the teachers coming out of Erdison. Teachers coming out of Erdison come out with a lot of high marks, a lot of the distinction in various subjects. But the results are not shown in the combinations. So there's a disconnect between teaching in the school and what teachers are taught at Erdison.
Yes, you've made some excellent points, and I am happy that you put forward some ideas, actual ideas for the reform, because I didn't want to actually sit here and pontificate in that regard. So here for the country as a whole, your input is giving perspective as to how one of the things that we can look at in relation to the change, even if we did it in a certain section of the country. So that is very, very important. I have my views on it. I appreciate your view. I mean, I would be happy to see if something like that actually did happen.
Because you see, we are doing this to children at age 11. I feel that all children in primary school should be taught all the subjects to go into secondary school, closest school to them. And at third form level, if you introduce technical vocational subjects in all of the secondary schools, there are children who will gravitate towards what they want. And then at the fourth and fifth form level, about 4 and above, you would have various schools teaching various subjects. In other words, children who are interested in technical vocational, there should be a number of schools teaching those subjects specifically. Those who want to do music, you send them to that particular school. Those who want to do commercial subjects do the same thing and for the various subjects. Because if you notice, a lot of children, St. Leonard's Boys has developed as a kind of a school with music, because a lot of children from St. Leonard's came from Wesley Hall, and Wesley Hall had a music background. And that's why you find that the St. Leonard's has a choir and things like that, because that's where it started. And they continued into the music. But we have to look seriously at the system and decide how we are going to change it. It's just like you have a house. You bought a house, you want to repair. You either demolish your house and build a new one, or you look at it and see what you can repair to keep. And as I would say, as I'm saying, abolish the conventions, get rid of the sixth form schools. All schools would then be equal, and that to me would be the beginning of improving the system in Barbados. And another thing, what people have to understand, the crux of the problem is in the primary schools. There are too many children coming out of primary school who cannot read and write. Nobody should be going into secondary school that can't read and write.
Caller, let me come in there, because what people don't seem to understand is that that last point is a significant point, but it cannot stand alone, because the problem in the primary school really has come about largely because of the impingement of the 11 plus into the primary school. In other words, the 11 plus significantly distorts both the content and the practice that and the organization of the primary school, and therefore, by only focusing on the primary school alone, in fact, you're not doing that. We would not. That is what some people are trying to say. That would not solve the problem, because the structural impediment still remains. So, with what you just said, along with the removal of the 11 plus, you would now free that colossus, that malignant colossus, from around the necks of our primary schools, and then you will get the primary schools to begin to do the kind of things that they ought to do, and in fact to develop a rounded student. The primary schools perhaps need to recognize that art and music and a whole range of other activities that students should be doing at that age are also should be part and parcel of the primary school, and it should not be driven by an arbitrary. It's very arbitrary exam, and that in fact, while it is true that you would still have testing and so on in the primary schools, that the primary schools should not be defined by that. The primary and I would like those persons who are arguing for this system to point to any progressive country in the world that transfers children from primary to secondary school on the basis of an arbitrary exam at 11.
And age.
At the age 11.
Right.
Especially when in a country like Barbados, we are spending 20% of our taxpayers' money on education. And I would say this. I am wondering how in a cabinet of Barbados, a minister who is not the Minister of Education could sit down every single year and watch education getting 20% of the budget, when very often their budget has to be cut, because they have to be asking the question. In my opinion, this is just an opinion. What are we getting in return? What Professor Lewis is saying to the Caribbean governments, particularly the Barbados government when he was alive, that education has to be seen as an investment. It is no longer a mere social service or a consumer goods that you just spend money on. That in fact, education must be seen as an investment in the human resources of this country, and that the manpower needs of the country has to be coming out of that. So the taxpayers of Barbados, I believe, are increasingly asking, what are we getting in return for this expenditure? And the answer is decidedly that we are not getting anywhere near the returns for that investment.
Okay, caller, I'm going to ask you to make your final point as we have to go to a commercial break. So I'm going to ask you to conclude.
What I'm just saying is that if we can get this system, look seriously at this system and reform it with everybody in mind, not thinking of the elite, everybody, that we can do better with this. In 5-10 years, we can have a reformed educational system, and you wouldn't have statements like CXC saying we are going to abolish certain subjects because people aren't taking them.
I am sure you are right.
Thank you very much.
You are so right.
Thank you very much for your contribution, caller. It's 10:29 in Barbados and across the Eastern Caribbean. We go to another commercial break. Stay with us.
Tired of the hassle of collecting your hardware supplies? Make your life easier with Koiman. Do you need to place an order for collection or delivery? Simply call our new dedicated order number at 539-7777. We deliver island-wide, making sure you get what you need when you need it. No more stress, no more rush. Just call 539-7777 and let Koiman handle the rest. Koiman, everything you need to succeed.
Hey, Q family, this is your boy DJ King Scorpion, the king of oldies. Headed out on the highway. Now I want you to join me on Q 100.7 FM every Saturday from 3 p.m. until 8 p.m. The vibes will be nice, the music will be sweet from the sugar bag with Saturday sweetness right here on Q 100.7 FM. Get up, good.
It's 10:30 in Barbados and across the Eastern Caribbean. It's Let's Talk About It on Q100.7 FM. The numbers to call are 434-1007 and 434-1070. You can also send us your WhatsApp contributions at 434-1007. We'll have some WhatsApp messages being read in just a few, but we'll return to the phone lines. We have Mr. Alwin Adams, who is discussing all matters education with us this morning. Good morning. Let's talk about it.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
A blessed good morning to Mr. Adams.
Thank
Good morning.
I would like to say at your feet I learned. A voice of intellectual as yours should never be silent.
Oh, you'll be happy.
I
would learn from you too, you know.
Oh, you wonder if I have anything to offer you.
Of course you do.
Oh, however, I watch the education system from not very far off. I work in the school system, not as a teacher, as an auxiliary staff, so I watch things, and I like to learn, and I like to listen, and I like to ask, so I watch the progression of education, huh?
Yes.
And I had the opportunity to read the brochure on
Education transformation?
Education transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I think, with all that Mr. Bab said this morning, if people would just get a hold of that document, read it, and try to understand it, they will see the need for education transformation. It might want a little tweet in here, and I believe that. Mr. Bab, you are one of the people that would have been involved in
Mr. Adams.
Adams, I'm sorry. You're one of the persons that would have been involved in preparing the document. I'm not sure if you were. But it's worth reading, and they will see the need for education transformation. And bearing all that Mr. Adams said in mind just now.
Mm-hmm.
That lady spoke well, but there's history.
Mm-hmm.
That will not work for today.
Yeah.
We need something to work for today and beyond. If it was that, what she spoke about, and we come all down to the 80s, we think it can work for now? No, we will see the 80s and 90s as history, but we into the 21st century now. We need to move from where we were.
Okay, I think I think you have some good points there. What I would say in relation to the document and the move towards reform, apart from the history, which we don't want to dwell on all the time, though we mentioned it is important, we have to recognize that the Barbadian public is not what you say a one size fit all. There are several publics, and that is why we was trying to say that the reform needs to bring all the best minds together and all the different sectors of the society together in order to have a firm discussion. And sometimes, you know, we might even have to take it out in some way, not directly, but in a way out of the hands of educators. And the reason why I say that is that in Britain, in an aspect of education, and this was tertiary education, in relation to the funding of it, since it was becoming increasingly unsustainable. But what the government did, and I'm not trying to put Britain on any pedestal, what they did though, they brought two bites at it. They brought a gentleman called I think Lord Deering, and then they brought Lord Brown. Lord Brown in particular came from industry, and he was brought in to head the commission to advise the government on restructuring the funding of tertiary education in Barbados. And he went around the country. He included persons of various hues on his commission. He had several meetings across the country, several inputs in terms of people writing letters and so on. The bottom line is that he was able, based on what he found from the different strands of the British society, he was able to bring that together and recommend to the government a system that he felt was sustainable in a way in which the education authorities in England by themselves could not get done. And I think that we have to look at industry in Barbados. We have to look at the justice system in Barbados. We have to look at the Parent Teachers Association in Barbados. We have to look at the unions in Barbados. We have to look at the students themselves in Barbados.
Yes.
And in so doing, it will take time. I am not going to
rush it. No, it can't happen overnight.
To say that it's going to happen overnight.
No.
And that
Understand
though it might appear to have faltered, that it does not mean that it should die. That you should look at it again and to see, because it should be a win-win situation. To be honest with you, one of the major, or to be blunt, one of the major stumbling blocks of education reform in Barbados is that the middle class in Barbados, that includes me. I came from a very poor working class background, but I can't say that I am.
You're there now.
There now.
Take me with you, please.
So the middle class in Barbados believe that their interests will not be served by the reform.
You see, that is why it have to be pushed, because having read the document, I can see where it will involve everybody. So that's why it need to be pushed. It need to be pushed, and it need to let people read it, have a read it.
But perhaps that is where the mistake is. That the middle classes believe that they have not been sufficiently. That's their belief anyway. Sufficiently involved. And you will find that the pushback, and I'm not saying that this model is the right model, but you have to show that there is something in it for everyone. It has to be a win-win situation.
Right. I understand you, sir. I understand you quite well.
Right. And therefore, I appreciate your input to say that as we have a relook at the reform in the education system, we need to see. For example, the middle class believe that they are benefiting from the system, and therefore it should not change.
Mr. Adams.
Wait a minute, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The working class believe that once you maintain the 11 plus, that they at least they too have a chance of benefiting from the system. The reality of the situation, though, is that it is the working class that are increasingly not benefiting from the system anywhere near how the working class is benefiting from it. And therefore you have to show that you can have a system that is going to bring the working class children more into the mainstream, while at the same time assuring the middle class that the standards are not going to drop. And I just want to say that the evidence is very strong in that direction, because there is no country at all, contrary to opinions that have been noised abroad in Barbados, without evidence. There's no evidence whatsoever to show that countries that have changed and moved away from this selective system at 11, that their education system have dropped. The opposite has actually happened, and every single country in the world that are the powerhouses in education, they do not have a one-shot system exam as we have in Barbados. And I think your point is a very good one.
Right, Mr. Adams, this is what I wanted to say. You know, town hall meetings just normally work, because it's I would like the government to find a place for you where you can stand before a complete audience, and because this is just a calling program, and let parents and people hear where the reform can take them. Your voice is a voice that needs to be heard openly to John Public, not just in this forum, if you understand what I'm saying. You need to be heard because we're not going back, we're going forward. And we see the need, the necessity for it. So we need your voice. We need your voice. I hope that somebody in authority listening to me, though my voice is a small voice, it would be heard loud enough that they can find a position to put you where you can speak to people, however they'll name it, however they'll label it, but find a place for you to speak to John Public on this issue because we need reform. And in addition to that, let me make my final point. Having worked in the school system, I am saying publicly here now that teachers should be respected. Teachers need to be respected. A teacher is a nurse, and I'm speaking at primary level, and I believe it would intensify at secondary. A teacher is a nurse, a lawyer, a doctor, a mother.
Yes.
That teacher displays
You know, madam.
Pardon me?
You know, you were saying that I should be put on this pedestal.
Yes,
I want to put you on the pedestal. I think that your contribution is so
quite valuable.
So valuable.
Yes, a teacher does make all the a teacher does.
And listen, at that point, no, you finish first.
No, I was just saying that a teacher display all of those roles that I just called in one day, and still are expected to produce what the ministry require of them.
But do
Hello?
Go ahead.
But do you know, as you were speaking, I am saying that in fact one of the areas that needs to be looked at in relation to the reform is how the teachers are treated and perceived and their needs.
Yes, that definitely needs to be looked at.
And therefore, and the unions and so on, I think as part of the reform package, one has to be able to assure the teachers that they are central to the reform.
Of course they are, but it can't be reforms for the teachers. I still need them.
And that therefore, as part of the reform situation, the government, the Prime Minister, whatever, or the commission that's been set up, must look to see to what extent teachers are upgraded and how the profession can be elevated and restructured, and how, for example, the management of schools can be enhanced to the benefit of the teachers. Whether you should have, say, 2 deputy heads in schools, where all schools really, because now you have a situation where you have the behavioral side and the academic side and so on, and the two have to work together. But the schools, the size of the schools, perhaps modern day school, might demand 2 deputy heads. They might demand a team of counselors rather than a counselor.
Right.
There are a range of things that must be brought into consideration. What incentives are you going to offer teachers in relation to housing and pensions? All of that is part of the reform. How are you going to attract your brightest and best persons into the teaching profession? Because we have to query whether at the moment we are getting the brightest and the best in the profession.
Right.
And to do that, you have to have that as part of the reform package.
Right.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I know you go ahead. I want to hear from you before.
Yes. So that once people are, for example, if you want to attract young people coming out of university and schools and so on into teaching, you may, apart from the fact I was speaking about housing and things like that and pensions, but you may have to have a kind of training profile that could justifiably allow a teacher a higher starting pay than an ordinary person in the civil service.
Fair enough.
There's a whole range of things that I would bring in there, and your contribution has led into that.
Thank you.
And that is lacking in the situation. So the unions would begin to see. In fact, I believe that perhaps the union might be one of this. I'm not so sure where the union is. If the unions are sitting on the fence, if they're really in favor of the reform, or if they are stumbling blocks. So you need to get them on board, so that when you come to the thing, you can say, well, the union is here because this is what they're getting from, this is what their teachers are getting. And I really appreciate your...
Yeah, you gave me a long spell and I really appreciate it. But just before you go, just let me make this one last small contribution. I watched 3 principals, 3 teachers from a primary school that I work at became principals. So you see, they can move. 3 magnificent teachers, and they were all ladies. But I watched them taught those children from stage to stage to stage, and all 3 of them became principals. 2 retire and 1 still in the profession. And I wish them.
Yes, your contribution is really good. I would just say that given the paucity of males in education, I mean, I think my children went to primary school. I'm not even sure if they were ever taught by a male.
I've never been taught by a male.
So, my children are boys. But I'm saying that we need to be able to get males, and this is part of the reform, because when you think about the numbers that I just called, about the 10,002 students in 1984 that got 0 to 30, 90% of those are boys.
Yeah.
So you have to have men. The government has to look to see over a period of time how they can attract males in quality males into the teaching
quality
profession.
males, that's the word, that's the operative word.
Quality males to give quality education, because I will speak about the quality education thing later on. But your contribution, well, the contributions today, I mean, it's been really good. I've been learning a lot.
Mr. Adams, I hope that they will have this program again. You will never time, because I heard you the last time. I didn't get it on, but I heard you the last time. I'm hearing you now, and I still strongly believe in my mind that there is a place for you in the open forum to speak on education reform. Thank you for
speak to Mr. McCaskey.
He's hearing me.
And caller Mr. Adams will be back with us on Friday.
Okay, thank you for entertaining me, and have a blessed day, and everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, caller. We appreciate your valuable contribution.
This is a good contribution.
Indeed. It's 12 minutes away from 11 at this point in time. Before we go to our next caller, I'll just read one WhatsApp message here from one of our contributors. The individual says, I strongly support the abolition of the 11 plus and is kindly asking that we don't replace it with another exam. The same concept of end-of-term test could be used if necessary to ascertain children's strengths and weaknesses in subject areas being taught, and in some cases you can determine if additional help and teaching is needed. But really and truly, I strongly believe that a total zoning system is the best way to go. Send children to one of the secondary schools in your catchment area. In the catchment area of the primary school, they attend and stop all this high flyer versus low flyer destructive behavior. And to a question the individual poses, do you realize that there is a certain age group who don't want to embrace change in our country?
Yes, good points. I'm really getting some good feedback from these contributions. I am a believer. Yes, there. It's not so much maybe an age group, but there's a class section of the society that will not easily go along with the change. There's no doubt about that, and it has. I think it has to be said. I think I can say it. In terms of zoning, the situation in Barbados for the government is that I think that it is believed that the prestige schools are around St. Michael, and that if you have zoning as is done across the world, that it would restrict the St. Michael secondary schools, St. Michael School or St. College, you can call them, that they are in the what you call the inner city area of British Town, and that therefore they would automatically be relegated to the dustbins of history, I suppose, but certainly all of their history and prestige and so on would go through the roof. There's something about that fear, but it is not insurmountable. And I believe that it should be discussed, and you should look to see to what extent you can have a proper comprehensive system of education. Because what we have now, we have a two-tier system, an advisive system, which some people call comprehensive. But if you have a proper comprehensive system of education, what will happen, and a whole number of things will happen. For example, your primary schools and your secondary schools would have to be working together, so that there will be and should be a situation where the students that are in the feeder area of the schools that are in that area would send children to your school. Therefore, the collaboration between the primary school and the secondary school would be one of mutual respect, rather than looking at the school to send its best children to your school. In the area of Bridgetown, that is a situation that is fraught with danger. Although history is very important. History will show that even in the so-called bad days, several students from Carrington Village and the Back Ivy and Lakes Folly and Wellington Street and so on went to Harrison College. In today's world, it is believed that those students will destroy, children coming from that area will destroy the school. And it comes to another area that I don't know if I should touch on, but let us say you are an MP. I'm not dealing with the present MP, but let us say you are the MP of the city, since people feel that the city is the main area of concern. If you are the MP for the city, and you are asking the people in the city for your votes, the number one question for every person in the city with children is that their children must have a quality education, and that they should not be sent to St. Lucie or St. John for that education. So the inner city must and should have quality primary and secondary education, so that a person does not have to get into a ZR van from Wellington Street or from Lakes Folly to go down to the uttermost parts of the north of Barbados, or up into Christchurch or wherever, or St. Philip and so on, to get an education. So the answer to the caller there is that you must not only have access to education, primary and secondary, which we have. What we want is quality, access to quality education, whichever part of Barbados you are. And that is the defining factor of the reform. So that if you are in Christchurch, I heard the MP for Christchurch indicating that Harrison College must remain because he went to Harrison College, and therefore everybody else must be able to go there. But he is the representative for Christchurch. And Christchurch has Christchurch Foundation School. It has Dayton Griffith School, and I'm not sure if the Garrison is in Christchurch or not. I don't know these areas very well. But the point is, his constituents should be going to a quality school in that area. That is where Bree St. John and all those people went to school in Henry Ford. They should not have to get into a ZR van to go down to St. Michael to school. And therefore, the contribution from the WhatsApp thing has a lot to bear, and should be taken into consideration when you bring people together to discuss how the education system ought to be reformed. You see, it cannot be reformed strictly from the Ministry of Education having a town hall meeting, a series of town hall meetings.
Mm-hmm.
It must, at its core, it must have Busy Williams or Proper Port, Mr. Bino, my good friend, and so on.
Mm.
It must have those kinds of people around the table, the Rotary Club, the Sir Optimist, and so on. And once you do that, you now have a national mission to reform. It must be propelled by a mission. It cannot be centrally done. And I think that is the beauty of that.
Okay, we thank you for that comment. We go to a commercial break. It's 4 minutes to 11. This is Let's Talk About It.
Get ready to show off your best summer snaps with the Morning Barbados Best Summer Photo Contest. Capture those sunny moments and submit your best shot to marketing@cbc.bb or via WhatsApp to 467-5465 from September 9th to 12th for a chance to win a 2-night staycation for 2, breakfast inclusive at Sunbay Hotel. Whether it's a beach day, a backyard barbecue, or a day out on the town with family or friends, we want to see your summer vibes. We'll post your photos to the CBC Barbados Facebook page and on CBC Barbados 246 on Instagram for our fans to vote by liking from September 16th until 12 noon on September 19th. Don't miss the chance to win in Morning Barbados Best Summer Photo Contest.
Stay connected and stay entertained with MCTV. Make your MCTV payments on or before the last day of the month and never miss your favorite movies and shows. For your convenience, MCTV payments can be made online through the Bank of Nova Scotia, CIBC First Caribbean, the Royal Bank of Canada, First Citizens Bank, or SurePay online, or at any post office or SurePay location. You can also utilize our cashier or Dropbox facility located at our offices at CBC The Pine. MCTV, entertainment for everyone.
It's Let's Talk About It on Q100.7 FM. It's 2 minutes to 11. We have another call on the line. Good morning. Let's talk about it.
Good morning to the entire panel and to your esteemed guests.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I will first say I must congratulate Mr. Adams on once again giving a fantastic presentation. And I want to say to the person, I remember one of the callers making the point that they don't want to hear the history. And I want to say to persons who contribute to these programs, stop trying to discuss things in a vacuum.
Correct.
You cannot discuss these matters or any matter in a vacuum. It does not make any sense. And then you have someone like Mr. Adams to show who is well researched and is educating the public of Barbados about this vital part of our society, education, which has always served this country very well over the years, and as with anything, needs to be reformed to suit the times that we are living in. So I again want to congratulate Mr. Adams on what he's saying, and I admonish people to be very careful in not wanting to hear the full story, because that is the only way we are going to be able to do a proper reform of the system. Another point. You know, Mr. Adams, you made the point about the middle class. And I want to agree with you 100% that it is the middle class itself who have benefited from the earlier reforms, who are now saying, who are in many ways the person who are objecting to any reform at all of education in this society at the moment. And I also want to say this, that the current proposals that are being put forward for education, in my view, in many cases, these current reforms, should be relooked, because in many ways we are still trying to protect those elite schools And I think that is wrong.
Sir?
That is wrong. And yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, because there's no, and that is why you're seeing this back and forth all the time. Because there is that group who, you know, history, you have shown the history this morning, how over time, people in this country have said, look, this system is not benefiting us. And there have been these gradual, you know, phases in the development of the educational system that have benefited people, more and more people all the time. And now is the time that people are saying we need more people to benefit. But again, you're finding these groups who say, look, okay, look, that's a little bit too far.
Yes.
You see, people don't understand that. Some people mentioned some years ago that if you lived in certain areas, well, definitely you couldn't get into certain schools. It is, in many ways, it is still the same. Yes. So you have a fella now walking across from Greenfields and going in at Harrison's College. Some people just don't want that. I don't want my child mixing with that person. We understand we have certain social issues in this country. But one of the ways to get, at least to reduce some of these issues, is through a reform in education and making it more equitable.
Yes.
And unless we do that, unless we are willing to bite the bullet, and the government has to, I don't know which government is going to do it, because as Mr. Adams, as you said, you very rightly said, many of the people who are charged with the responsibility of doing these reforms or to carry out these reforms, who are the policymakers, are products of these very schools that they're trying to protect. And they'd see it as their mission to protect these institutions. They like to walk around and talk about, you know, I went to this school and I went to the next school, you know, and their little clubs and cliques and everything else. So that is why we are having this pushback in many areas, especially with the 11 plus.
Yeah, sir. Yeah.
I know time is short, so yes. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, as I said, I'm learning and getting some really high class contributions from which I can make some comments. It is interesting to note that in a magazine here, an article written by Dr. Graham Dan, I think he was a sociologist, and he quoted the headmaster or the principal, but I tend to use the word headmaster, in your secondary school in Barbados, in which that headmaster said at his speech day that he was very concerned, he was bemoaning the fact that at his institution, which was a newer secondary school, he was having a disproportionate number, his intake to his school, of what he termed, this is his direct words at the speech day address, he referred to the students as tortoises, the intake coming from the 11 plus, that he was having all tortoises, while there were more privileged establishments. This was the school in St. Lucie, I might as well say who it was, while there were other schools that were having all the hares meaning the rabbits that can run fast, the high flyers. And it was fairly unusual, really, for principals in Barbados to be that was as outspoken as he could get, because the principals were not expected to be outspoken, largely because the propaganda impact and effect of what was being said about education in Barbados is that this system was the fairest system that one could ever conceive in relation to education in Barbados. And since every child in Barbados was going to a secondary school, there was really nothing to complain about, because everybody had the so-called same chance. So there was this complaint. In the same year, the headmaster of a school in Bridgetown, at his speech day, and this school now being an elite school. He himself, surprisingly, agreed. It say here, a few days later, the head teacher of perhaps the most prestigious school on the island, instead of rebutting the allegations. You notice that we had a few callers earlier on rebutting rebutting the facts.
Yes.
Supported his colleague when he pointed out to the perpetuation of class differences and a certain disregard for the less fortunate within the present system that we have. That was the headmaster of Harrison College at his speech there in 1983. He is agreeing with the headmaster of St. Lucie that this system is iniquitous and social, bring about social injustice in the country, which at that time might not have been as evident as it is now, because generation after generation it is becoming worse and worse, and we are seeing and suffering from the social dislocation that it has caused. And indeed, if the projects in Barbados were to take off in terms of economic growth and development, we will have to import skilled labor.
Of course.
After having this education in Barbados from 1881 onward. And that is the point that you were making. It is a very significant point. And I just want to say that what has really fooled people is because it may be political or otherwise, or they fall for the propaganda. When we got free secondary education, which allowed every child who sat the 11 plus to get the chance to get a place and so on, people misconstrued that. Because what it did, it didn't really even level the playing field in its true sense. It gave the notion that you had a chance to go to Lodge, or you had a chance to go to Harrison College. And so on and so on. But it did not change the structure of the school, or of the system. And it did not even change immediately. It did not even change the numbers, because the numbers in the older secondary schools were small. When I went to College in Paris in 1955, the school had just been amalgamated, because the two prior schools that were separate together did not have 100 students. And when I got there in 1955, and I was well over 11 years old, which I must have been a slow learner. I think they would deem me now to have been a slow learner, but I don't think I was. But the point that I am making is that in 1955, when I got there, a mere 300 students were at the school, and I thought it was a massive school. And it is only that extension of the school that allowed more students from the north to get in, and luckily almost 99% of those students came from the north. Not a single one came from St. Philip, not a single one came from Christchurch or any one of those far-flung places. And when you look to see what was the contribution of the students from that school and from that location, not only to the north of the island but to Barbados in general, you can see the folly of persons trying to say that zoning would be detrimental to the country. I want to congratulate you for the input that you've made.
And you know, and you can translate that to the entire social landscape and educational system in Barbados. I want to take up on one more point quickly that you made, that I think a lot of people, you know, have some misconceptions about this idea that a person who is so-called not doing well academically can be shoved into a technical stream. And I'm happy also that you made that point, because if you are not able to deal with the basics, how are you going to take up a saw or a hammer or a tape and go and build somebody's house?
Yes, I agree with you.
It is total madness.
Yes.
Imagine employing such a person. You know, so we have to see these things as a whole.
Yes.
Because children have to have the basics, and that foundation that will allow them to function in whatever area that they care to pursue.
Yes, sir.
And not just put them off side there and say, well, look, listen, you ain't doing so well here. I think you better go in the garden or to somewhere or the other. No, you go there and you don't know a weed from a carrot, and you you don't read a label on some pesticide that you got to use, or you can't read it. These are the things that we have to stop doing.
Yes.
But those things are part of our colonial legacy also, as you know.
Yes, that is part of the colonial legacy, and it is what you might call high-class foolishness.
More than high-class foolishness. People should be done, in some mental institution for suggesting such things.
Yes. And in terms of the curriculum and so on, there are different. People say there's mathematics is mathematics, but there are different types of mathematics.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it was interesting when I was working in the Bahamas and I traveled in England and so on. They had mathematics for industry.
Yes.
in the sense that there are certain esoterics of mathematics that we are bedeviling our students with.
Yes.
That had nothing at all to do with the practical living of life.
Uh-huh.
And if we were to introduce that type of mathematics in the school, you would see the vistas of the students would open up, and the interest that they would show, and the reception that you would get from them, and their ability now to move into the world with a new concept. So I am so much taken up with the kind of inputs that I'm getting from the population, and I think that this kind of input for some time have not been aired, have not been ventilated, and has not been part and parcel of the reform movement.
Persons can only ventilate it if they have done the research, if they have been in the system in many cases, and intimately involved. And this is where your expertise comes in, and that is why I made the early point that persons need to listen, because every time you have come to this program and you have spoken about this topic, I have been able to learn something each time.
Yeah, but sir, I want to mention something that I must have mentioned last week. People don't know this in the sense about the history. The onset of secondary education in Barbados came about in an atmosphere of disquiet and almost upheaval. It led to upheaval actually in 1876, the Confederation riots.
Yes.
The architect of the system was operating in that climate in Barbados, and the system that he set up was not at all. No person who done the history and so on can say that he set it up to bring the children of the masses into the mainstream. What he did was to take instructions from the powers that be at the time to use the school as a means of social control of the black population in Barbados. And so the secondary schools in Barbados were really bastions of colonialism in Barbados to perpetuate British rule in Barbados. And when it did get the blacks into it and so on, these were the ones that would be channeled into the civil service and so on to help to keep the country under control. And it was the education. Now the carrot whip from slavery had been removed. So what, according to Bob Marley, what you are getting now is mental slavery. And it is only we, as the song was saying, only we ourselves can free ourselves from this mental slavery. What we have done so far is free ourselves from the vestiges of constitutional kind of colonialism with the Republic.
Yes.
But the work is not finished. The work cannot be finished until the education system has been freed, and that we ourselves have gotten together and forge what we want, what we really need, as I think McConney said, we need to be able to forge a new identity, not the identity that was given to us by the colonials. And we need to have the opportunity of achieving our sustainable national development through education. And that is being stymied right now as we speak by the education system that we have in our midst that came from the 19th century colonials. And that is where the issue is.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adams. Caller, I'm going to give you some time to conclude now. We have to go to a commercial break.
Yeah, I will thank Mr. Adams, and I thank the organizers of this program for having him, and I hope that he will continue to educate the public of Barbados on this very vital area.
Thank you very much for your call and your contribution. The program continues in just a moment.
Parents and guardians are advised that the Ministry of Health and Wellness will hold Saturday clinics for childhood vaccines from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. during the month of September. The dates and locations are Saturday, September the 7th, the Brantford Tape Polyclinic, Black Rock, St. Michael. Saturday, September 14th, the Edgar Cochrane Polyclinic, Wildy, St. Michael. Saturday, September the 21st, the Eunice Gibson Polyclinic, Warren, St. Michael. And Saturday, September 28th, the Frederick Freddie Miller Polyclinic, Glebe, St. George. The clinics are being held to allow parents and guardians who have expressed challenges with attending clinics during the week to access important immunization for vaccines preventable diseases such as measles.
Does your stomach flare up when you eat certain foods? Do you experience bloating, gas, cramps, constipation, or irregularities? Then you are not alone. Probiotic XL is unique and is scientifically formulated. It supports healthy digestive and immune functions. Probiotic XL can help fix the way you feel. It helps your body back to a healthy balance. Available from pharmacies and health stores island-wide. Pick yours up today and get back to feeling great again.
Members of the Q family, the Q bus is headed to Grisex Plainfield, Grisex St. Michael, for another edition of Q in the Community on Thursday, September the 5th. That's tomorrow. The Q bus will be provided from Gate 1 of the Granville-Williams bus terminus, and the first trip will be at 11 a.m., with subsequent trips leaving every hour. The Q bus will travel along the following route: Granville-Williams bus terminus, Wharf Road; Princess Alice bus terminus, Mason Hall Street; Eagle Hall, Tudor Bridge, left onto Grisex New Road, and right onto Grisex and onto the Grisex Plainfield for the Big Q. The last trip from the Grisex Plainfield Grisex St. Michael will be at 11 p.m. going to both the Princess Alice bus terminus and the Granville-Williams bus terminus.
This summer, QFM takes you through summer like no other. Celebrate summer on Q as we help you burn off those calories.
I know you miss me. I know you miss me. I know you miss me, love.
Tune your waistlines with our rhythmic summer collection of music all day and all night long.
It's finally here, Q100.7 FM listeners. We are on Instagram. Give us a follow on our new Instagram page at Q100.7 FM for more of your favorite radio station. Q100.7 FM, the heart of the community. Follow us.
The Q train is making its next stop at Grisette's Playing Field, Grisette St. Michael, on Thursday, September 5th. Join us from 11 a.m. for another exciting Q day filled with your favorite Q tunes that will keep you on the dance floor all day long. And we can't forget the food, the drinks, and the karaoke. See you at Grisette's Playing Field, Grisette St. Michael, on Thursday, September 5th, because Q is good for you.
Lying here beside you.
Where are we off to today, everybody?
I want an easel, paint brushes, canvas, and paint, of course.
Can I get a tie-dye kit, fabric paint, and some glitter glue, please?
Don't forget me. I need a sketch pad, crayons, and markers for school.
Sounds like we'll be on the road all day.
Not if we go to Lori Dash. They've got everything we need. We'll be home in no time.
Make Lori Dash the craft shop your #1 stop for all your artistic needs. From toddlers to professional artists, we've got you covered. Lori Dash, the craft shop located at the Walk St. Thomas and in Bridgetown.
If I didn't have a dime and I didn't take the time to play the jukebox, por favor.
Welcome to Q Jukebox, where we give you a chance to punch a tune. We'll tell you when to call and select a number on the Q Jukebox between 1 and 300. Then listen to your selection played instantly on Q Jukebox. Let's have fun this summer with QFM, the heart of our community.
If I didn't have a dime and I didn't take the time to play the jukebox.
Q Jukebox, September 2nd to 30th.
We have just about 9 minutes left on the program. It's Let's Talk About It on Q100.7 FM. We are talking all matters related to education this morning. So I ask our callers to bear the time in mind, as we have just now 8 minutes to 11:30. Good morning. Let's talk about it.
Good morning, Ms. Adams.
Good morning. Glad to hear you.
Unfortunately, no, we don't have the time.
You go ahead.
But hopefully, Sherwood can organize that you and I sit on a panel that we can have a proper and thorough discussion of education. Now, we covered last week about the history and those sort of things. And as I have said before, I totally agree with you and I totally appreciate the things that you said.
Yeah.
But now, this is where some of the things that you said today I am not that comfortable with yet.
Yeah.
Main reason let me put this clear, let me make this lucidly clear for everybody that listens are always here. I am fully 1000% in support of total education reform.
Yeah.
Okay? I believe that this education system right now is failing us as a country, and it needs to be reformed. And for all the reasons that you've given in terms of it, the certain people not wanting things to change and all those sort of things, I agree with. My problem comes with when we attempt to do this reform, and why the people that the powers that be are going to be doing this reform. It is not for some of the reasons that you have expressed. Those will be using as an excuse.
Yeah.
But it's more for the reason not to fix the things that need to be fixed, particularly in the primary school system. So you don't address the problems that exist, okay? Yeah. Because you say, hello?
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Go ahead.
Go right ahead.
You don't address the true problems that exist within the system, because you're going to say, okay, now we are going to abolish 11 plus and everything will be hunky-dory. We are going to total zoning and everything will be hunky-dory. One of the things which you might not know also about me, my mother, you might know my mother, Jane Latouche, and she worked was a career civil servant, and she worked in the Ministry of Education, particularly when zoning and those things were introduced.
Yes.
So therefore, from years ago, I have heard her speak in terms of zoning and understanding the challenges that we have with zoning in Barbados. And again, because time is short, the challenge of some of those things I'll just get into is that we have to talk in terms of the convenience for people, because a person might live one place, but then really and truly work on another side of the island, and it might be easier for them to take that child to school on the other side of the island and then pick them up after school on the other side of the island and come home, as opposed to having them stay at home to then try to go to school, quote unquote, within the catchment area.
Okay,
yes.
caller.
Anything else? Now that it certainly has to be taken into consideration, but the obverse of that is also true. So it is a factor that one would have to take into consideration, so that a person living in Pike Corner does not feel that he has to bring the child with him to Wesley Hall. But yes, I can see the point that you are making, and that is why I'm saying that I have refrained so far from giving any kind of definitive solution, because we need to bring all those factors into consideration, and we need to also understand what it needs for the students, because concomitant with what we are discussing now is the fact that in the press recently, late last week or whatever, or earlier this week, you had a situation, it is not new, of violence, and it's usually youth violence, and a lot of discussion came about in relation to that, but very little was said that the education system is really an incubator of that, and the notion of having almost abandoning our children to crisscross the country to go to school, as though they were back in the 50s and so on in the United States with busing, 50s and 60s and so on. It's something that we have to look at, and this stigma that has been attached, I don't need a stronger word, to certain schools in Barbados. So
we have to take the final caller, Mr. Adams, before you conclude. Yes, we're not going to take the caller. We have just about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to allow you to conclude.
Okay, I'm going to conclude with me.
Yes, sir.
So that we are looking at the fact that merely going to certain schools, whatever we want to butter it up and so on, there's a perception by the children from the word go, almost from the time the results come back, that they are second-class citizens. And if I didn't do this, and over a system that is really out of order, I just don't want to use any high-sounding phrases. This 11+ system and the system that we have is out of order. And one of our journalists by the name of Gaston Holder, he said that the dogged adherence to the 11+ was never educationally defensible. It was nothing more than the triumph of the bureaucratic tendency towards conformity and exclusion over flexibility and common sense. So it cannot be defended educationally, and during the time that I am here on Friday or so, we will be able to show from experts that it was not. But I want to quickly run through some things that come from the street.
We don't, unfortunately, we don't have the time to run through, but you can run through on Friday. This has been Let's Talk About It on Q100.7 FM. You can tune in tomorrow at 9 a.m.
The time ran very fast.
The time ran very fast indeed. And you can tune in to hear Mr. Adams on Friday at 9 a.m. I'm Rashid Best. I was joined by my co-host Joshua Hinkson. And we give a special thanks to our producer Sherwood McCaskey and to technical operator Andre Herewith. Good morning.